Now, I often get asked down in the comments section, what is the best video that you've uploaded? And I sort of go, oh, I don't really know, probably 20 doors in 100 seconds, simply because that did really well, and it's my most viewed video. It makes sense that that's also my favourite. But one that does come to mind is the shifting cave system, uploaded on October the 4th, 2014. Now, the idea was you had a cave, you hit a button, and then it would transform it into some form of base. For those of you who haven't seen it, let's quickly go back in time. So this right here is the original system. As you can see, it is absolutely enormous. It involved a whole ton of redstone, and because of the way that I did it, it wasn't actually expandable. This was the biggest cave you could possibly do. But anyway, if we hit the button, you can see that all of the pistons will kick into action, and this is decorated really coolly. I'm going to have to change out the design that I've used in the new cave. However, despite the lovely, homely looking environment, there were a few issues. Number one is, of course, it's not expandable. Number two, the ceiling is still looking very cave-like, which isn't particularly very good. And number three, as I mentioned earlier on, it is enormous. I mean, this is a huge, huge redstone contraption. So I went back to the drawing board and I wanted to see if I can improve things. This right here was new design number one. As you can see, considerably smaller. I mean, this thing is comparatively pocket-sized. And also, if we hit this button over here, you can see that it works incredibly quickly and also swaps out the roof. Don't worry, this decoration is going to be changing. But there was one thing that was kind of bugging me about this design. If we hit this button right here, you can see that when it transforms back, I mean, that's not a very natural looking cave, is it? You got blocks all over the place. It looks like a square, basically. It's like a room changer, and that's really no good. So I added in some extra circuitry. Design number two, and things are looking a lot more natural now. We've got a few blocks here and here, and also some extra blocks up at the top. This is definitely looking like a cave to a certain extent. But if we pop out the back, you can see that things have got just a tiny bit bigger in the process, namely at the top and also down at the bottom, and I'll explain why later on in the video. But first, we need to hit this button right here, and as you can see, the entire room will change around. So those blocks get retracted back, they then get pushed into the piston feed tapes, and then we have ourselves a rather cool looking room. I mean, the decoration is a little bit sci-fi. I personally don't particularly like it very much, but it looks cool. We have transformed a cave into an actual livable room. The only issue is that there's no functionality. I would really love a crafting bench in here, but there's no redstone mechanism to do that. So I thought to myself, how hard can it be? I want to add that in. Many hours later, I came up with design number three. Now, the reason that it took so long is because I wanted to make sure that the dimensions stayed exactly the same, but I had to do some pretty big changes to this redstone circuitry right here, and it took a long time to work out how I was going to fit it all in. But once again, we have exactly the same cave. We hit this button over here and everything will transform, and this time I have gone for much better decoration inspired by design number one. So here we have the room. We've got all of the bookshelves, everything is looking lovely. It looks like the perfect place for an old person to just set up an armchair or something like that and chill out all day long. But the important part is, ta-da! We have got ourselves a pop-up crafting bench. So this thing pops up out of the floor and it looks perfect. I mean, this looks like it's been built by a player. But when that player wants to hide away their little base, all they have to do is hit this button right here and everything will disappear. The crafting bench gets tucked back into the floor and then gets pulled across just like that. And we have a cave. We've got a cave back again. Honestly, I cannot tell you how much I love this redstone contraption. I think this thing is absolutely hilarious, brilliant, and also, yeah, very complex. There's quite a few things going on right here, so I'm going to try my best to explain to you everything that is happening. So let's start things off with the easy bits, and that is the 3 side sections. Now, I am actually going to show you how these things work outside of the redstone contraption, but I feel like I should show you them in this massive mess, just so you can tell exactly what they're doing. So these things right here, so this is one, this one here is that one, the vertical one, and then this one here is another one. All of these are piston feed tapes. Now you may be sat there thinking, these do not look like piston feed tapes, and that is because they're only 2 blocks wide. So what we do is we use sticky pistons to retract this block, and then we use regular pistons to push this block, and we essentially feed the blocks in a 2 wide area just like this. So when we hit the button, these blocks here will be pushed around so that they're on the other side. Now, I'm going to try my best to demonstrate this to you using this side, but I will warn you, it happens incredibly quickly. So there we go, the blocks are being cycled round, and there we go, it's done. All it needs to do is cycle around 4 times, and it does that as fast as possible using these little hopper clocks right here. Now with design number 1, I also did this for the roof. So these piston feed tapes up at the top are exactly the same as the other piston feed tapes, and when we hit the button, everything happens really nice and quickly. But there was one slight issue which I didn't think of when I first designed it. And that is, if I wanted like a natural looking cave with blocks dropping down like this and like that, unfortunately, with the design of the piston feed tape, obviously I can't get pistons in between the blocks to be able to extend those down. So to extend blocks down into the cave, the pistons would need to be on this layer right here, pointing downwards, and obviously you can't do that because this is the layer of blocks that is being cycled round. So I had to use a different style of piston feed tape, and I didn't have enough space to build a traditional piston feed tape that didn't have the sticky pistons. So that meant I had to do something fairly drastic, and it involved a lot more redstone. So what we have at the top here, if you can just about see, is a double piston extender piston feed tape. So the way that this one works is these pistons extend downwards, pushing this block down to here, and then these pistons push it across, and these pistons extend, retract this block to pull it up to here, and then these pistons push it across, which means that we have a little bit of airspace between these blocks and these blocks, allowing us to place in some pistons so that we can extend blocks down into the cave to actually make it look like a cave instead of it looking like a square room. And the same thing happens down at the bottom as well. So we've got a double piston extender that is retracting these blocks right here, pulling them down, then these pistons push them across, and then these pistons push them up 2 blocks, and these pistons push them across right there, which means that we actually have to build double extenders and then make sure that everything is timed correctly inside the piston feed tape, then make sure that we have a redstone clock that is slow enough to allow all of that stuff to happen without it getting all muddled up and basically tripping over itself, which can happen and happened a lot in my practice runs. So if we hit this button, we will see the actual system working. So there are the pistons, there is the double retraction, and there is the shifting, and as you can see, it actually happens really fast. I mean, it's not a particularly slow system, it's just a lot. I mean a lot of piston firing action. Now one thing that I probably should explain is the way that we extended these blocks out into the system still wasn't particularly simple because of the way that everything worked out and the fact that we still had blocks over the top of the piston. So these pistons are on the inside of the piston feed tape. We can't actually run a redstone line in there. So we had to use observer blocks facing downwards into these blocks right here to power these pistons, and we had to update those observer blocks at the beginning of the cave shifting pulse. So when it is already a cave, then we have to trigger those at the start of that pulse so that it retracts so that it doesn't mess the piston feed tape. And then we need to make sure they don't activate when it's actually in room form, because otherwise that will look really silly. But then they also need to extend back out at the end of the room shift to cave phase. I feel like that didn't make any sense. I think I'm going to show you these piston feed tapes outside of all of this circuitry. This looks a tiny bit easier to digest, doesn't it? And if we hit this button right here, now you can see all of the circuitry. This is much simpler to understand how the actual piston feed tape works. So we hit the button, we get the double extensions, and then we also get the single piston. So this one pushes up, this one pulls down, and then we get to the blocks being pushed across. I mean, when you look at it like this, it's actually a really easy little circuit, but when it has to be jammed in with everything else that is going on inside this behemoth of a redstone contraption, that's when things begin to get a little bit confusing and circuits begin mixing with one another and compactness just gets in the way and it becomes quite a painstaking process. But I am chuffed to bits with the end product. I couldn't be happier with how cool this looks, and I hope you have enjoyed this little redstone contraption right here. It looks like we have ourselves a little creeper visitor. But anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little complex redstone contraption. This is my first complex contraption in a long time, so if you do want to see this sort of thing more often on the channel, please let me know down in the comment section. If you have enjoyed this video, please sure to hit that like button, and if you really loved it, then make sure to subscribe. But thanks for watching, guys. This has been Mumbo, and I'm out. I'll see you later.